So let's jump up then north to Algeria. So going all the way up at the top, and we have our other example of global prehistory. And again, we're talking about rock art with our running horned woman from Tasli, Niger. And across the Sahara region, this is the oldest and most widespread form of art that we find across the region. All right, it's certainly not just focused in Algeria there, but you find it. There's an immense amount of work like this. In Tasli, Niger itself, this region, there are over 15,000 drawings and several hundred engravings, okay, throughout this site. And the really interesting thing about it is if we could compare the different styles, and scholars have nailed down specific styles. There's one that's called the large wild fauna, which has these monumental giraffes, hippos, elephants, stuff that doesn't live in the Sahara. And the art that we see from this period gives us a peek or a hint at the Sahara when it was a different type of ecology, right? Because it used to be a very lush and fertile region. So we have these various different styles that we can kind of track through time that give us glimpses of this sort of changing world that's much different than it is today. The dating has been somewhat problematic here, especially because a lot of the works throughout this part of the world are engravings, and that's extremely difficult to be able to date, but scholars have looked at other, especially archaeologists, have looked at other evidence around the area and have kind of nailed it down to sometime after 10,000 BCE as the time when humans sort of re-emerged or re-entered a very green Sahara, okay? If we look at our figure here, the running horned woman, we can see that it's a humanoid, it's a human figure, but it's got horns coming out of the head, and it's very tempting to want to link that with something right up the road, with ancient Egypt, right? Because we have lots of examples from that. But again, the work that we see in Tasli and Niger preceded cultures in the Nile Valley, okay? If we just talk about this image on its own, we'll start kind of with the style. So this is a style that's known as the archaic, sometimes it's referred to as the round head style, okay? And so if we're looking at a timeline of the different styles of either rock engraving or rock painting in this part of the world, the earliest is called the large wild fauna. The middle is this archaic or roundhead style, and then the latter is the pastoralist style, okay? And again, you can kind of link not only ecology, but also social order with the way that these are depicted. The pastoralist style shows often a lot of more kind of settled communities and gives a suggestion for animal husbandry. So what do we say about this? The head is seemingly featureless, which is one of the aspects from this archaic style. And we, in terms of dating, have a better idea because of the use of pigments here. So scholars have nailed it down to this 6,000 to 4,000 BCE. What are we looking at, though? If we're kind of just breaking down the form and the iconography, the content, what do we see going on here? There's been a lot, again, of speculation as to what exactly is going on. We can, yeah. No, yeah, please.
My students last week had a really wonderful discussion about this, and right off the bat, they made connections with what they already know about some African art, and that is either the body paint or the body tattoo.
Sure.
The real meticulous rows of dots.
Mm-hmm.
That's something they picked up right off the bat.
Okay.
She's in motion.
Right. So we have this very active figure, and you can see that the body has been embellished with something. It's been suggested that maybe it could be scarification, maybe. Maybe it's paint, that's been applied to the body, maybe. There's been suggestions also that it has to do with either grain or rain. And that kind of takes us a little bit broader if you look at everything else that's going on around here. She's got these wonderful sort of repetitive elements there. These streamers coming off of the forearm and on the torso. Maybe it's a skirt, maybe it's raffia fiber, maybe. It's also been suggested that maybe it's rain. And then we come to this idea of scale. We have a whole bunch of other figures here, and then we have this enormous one in the middle. Is this someone who is performing, or are we talking about hierarchy here? Are we talking about maybe a spiritual being? Maybe it is. The upper portion there with all the dots, I've read accounts of it being linked with rain. I've also read perspectives that suggest that this is a cloud of grain that's falling down. Yeah.
So with Lascaux caves, and you have a lot of overlapping
Mm-hmm.
with different pigments and different styles, so it seems like different artists came back.
Mm-hmm.
Do they think that a similar thing is happening here, that it's coming back and she was just done on top of a previous drawing, or is she being composed at the same time as that previous drawing and dominating them?
It's a great question, because we have all of this overlap going on here, and if indeed these were done at two different times, then that really impacts how we're reading this. And I've also read, there's one particular scholar that suggests that some of the surrounding figures are actually from the pastoralist style, which would place it a lot later. So maybe we are talking about two competing time periods.
So that the small ones might be later.
That's certainly been suggested. Yeah. And then we've got these other sort of oddities like this. And what do we think that is? Looks like a rainbow, right? We see shapes in context, and we see it through our 21st century eyes. But there is one scholar out there who has looked at this form of the band and compared it to representations of a rainbow from Mesopotamia. I don't know if we can really make that link. Again, a lot of the why comes down to speculation with these images because of the date. But there is a lot that we can just take from form and make comparisons with. And I think perhaps the best taking off point with this image has to do with the figure itself, because we have this great sort of twisted perspective going on here. All right? So we're not looking at something in strict profile, but we're seeing, again, this sort of composite by the way that the figure is moving into space, and this wonderful, wonderful active form there. I don't know if we were faced with doing a comparison between what we see at Apollo 11 and here, if there's any kind of a link we could make in terms of the sort of composite approach to figures. Maybe, maybe not. Certainly, two different expressions of prehistoric art using similar materials and in a similar sort of a setting.
I have difficulty finding sources and being able to explain to my kids a significance aside from the fact that she appears to be so joyous to me.
Mm-hmm.
And she is profoundly outfitted,
Yeah.
if not costume. I mean, with all that grass, the movement would have been thrilling.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we are to read this as an individual, not something like a deity, then certainly we need to go down that road of performance art and talk about all the accoutrements there, and the fact that this is some kind of a celebration, some kind of a performance. There's a significance there with the way that this individual has been kind of loaded up with what she's wearing there.
Much like you said before about
Absolutely.
Is that kind of your take on this personally?
On this,
Not so much.
you know, I'm really hesitant to make any kind of connections, especially in terms of masking traditions. You know, at this point in time, the Sahara looked much different, and we had different peoples there. If we're talking about more contemporary time, masking traditions you don't find anywhere near this part of the world. So, you know, that's a tough question. It really is. It's tempting. It's awfully tempting to make that link. But given the date, you know, again, just like the first image, we're kind of stuck with our formal analysis and with the context in which it was found. Yeah.
Two things. One, was this in a cave? This wall, where is this?
So all over Tasli and Ajer, there are lots of little caves and sort of little cubbies all throughout here. And that was it was set back in a space like that. Yeah. Yep.
And the other thing is it would be important for our students to learn the words conjecture and, because if they're going to write about these words, which they may be asked to,
Mhm.
they're going to have to use those terms, right? When
Yeah.
they can't talk about it as fact.
Yeah.
I keep comparing to Lascaux,
Hmm.
plot them together.
Yeah.
Lascaux is much more difficult to go to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas these were more, they're very prevalent.
Much more accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, it almost seems maybe more like a home decoration than a specific roses.
Yeah.
First conjecture.
Yeah, you know, I wish I had an answer. But again, you know, it's good because now we're thinking about context, and we're thinking about that in comparison to what we know about Lascaux and about accessibility. You know, even that in itself, I think, is good for learners to start thinking about because they're applying and making these comparisons about context. All right.